So I'm going to tell you guys my location for once because it's pertinent to the video, and I'll just have to take my chance with internet stalkers and intelligence officers tracking me down in the middle of the night and knocking on my van door. And so I'm somewhere in Labrador. Where's Labrador, says the people in unison, as the geography is not the strong point of Americans. I didn't know where it was either until I got here. It's in northeast Canada, and it's beautiful. Like, there's these funky trees everywhere that are really small, but I don't know if you can kind of see them behind me, but they're the only ones around. They don't grow higher than 20 feet, and it's really wet, and there's ponds and streams and rock formation. It's a really nice place, but there's no people, which has its benefits, but it also has its downsides. And one of the downsides, or benefits, depending on how you look at it, is there's no cell service anywhere. I found out when I got up here. There's like almost no cell service in all of Labrador, and also in pretty much all of northern Canada. Like pretty much anything 50 miles north of the border, except for some areas of like Alberta, pretty much don't have cell service except for right at the cities, which I think is a good jumping off point to talk about the pros and cons of libertarianism and of privatization. So you might be wondering, why is there no cell service out here? A person hypothetically out here might wonder, why does my cell phone never work? And they might Google it, and they might find out, well, they could Google it if they were stupid, but they probably figured it out themselves because they're pretty smart, and they've been driving all day for 2 days wondering where all these people are and where's the cell service is, and then realized that those things are correlated. There's no cell service out here because there's not that many people, and it just would not be a prudent financial decision for the cell phone companies to provide a service that wouldn't bring in the revenues necessary to justify the costs of providing that service to those people. And so the free market, the guiding hand of the free market, which is all-knowing and all-powerful, decided that cell service is not going to be provided to the northern half of Canada, and that's more or less how it goes. And that's actually the same reason that there's large swaths of the country in America where there's no high-speed broadband internet, which is because there's no company that's going to spend millions of dollars installing fiber optic cables to the middle of nowhere that are a huge expense for the company, but generate almost no revenue in return from the small number of people in those communities who are paying for that expense. And so because of that, they're just not going to install those cables, and those people are not going to have internet. But then if it's 2020, or God forbid 2070, if we can make it another 50 years, then those people might have a hard time living in the real world because there's going to be no internet there. And so people might have heard about or noticed that like the people are flooding to population centers, and those areas are getting more wealthy, and the rural areas are getting more poorer. And that's one of the reasons, is that it's just providing these extra services to a small number of people is not in the interest of these companies. And insofar as privatization and specifically fiscal conservatism and libertarianism, those ideologies are winning out, which they have been for the better part of 40 years in America. That's just going to keep on happening. And so do people think that's a good thing? I would argue that it's not a good thing in general, and that's one of the reasons I'm not a big fan of privatization. And that's that's something you're not allowed to say in America, so I had to come all the way up here to Labrador to drive the point home. And that's for a few reasons, but one of them is that there's these things called market failures, which happen quite a lot, in fact all the time, where private actors and the free market is not able to provide essential goods and services, like, I would argue, especially in the future, but even today, for a lot of the current economy, especially during COVID, people are all working from home. If you don't have internet, you're kind of SOL. Like, I mean, you can dig ditches and shovel manure and push your cows around. I don't know what people do. I live in the city. I don't know what those grungy folks out there do, but no, you can, like, there's certain jobs where you don't need the internet, but pretty much you're going to need to have high-speed internet if you want to participate in the global economy, especially as things become more automated and more remote, which is definitely the trend that it's going in. And so if there's not a way to fix that market failure and get these people internet, then the continued deindustrialization of rural America is going to continue, and we know that that's one of the driving forces for why everybody hates each other. And if you ever go from a city to outside of a city, you might notice a bunch of kind of annoying liberals, but also maybe some nice people, but super techie, everybody loves the Democrats, kind of upper middle class type people, and then you go out to the rural country and it's a bunch of, you know, Trump signs and you know, kind of other type of people, and they don't like each other very much. Well, this is one of the reasons. There's a lot of reasons, but that's one of the reasons. And so you need to make it so that there's a equal playing field for those two groups of people, so that they don't hate each other, and, you know, have the city people view the other people as kind of lazy rednecks that, you know, just aren't able to adapt to the new economy, and then the rednecks don't view the city people as a bunch of whatever they say about those people. And it's not just market failures with the internet. It's for more important things too. Things like healthcare, which I've come to realize as I travel around this country, which is, it seems a lot like America, to be honest. It's just colder, there's fewer people up north, and the roads are a little nicer. There's not quite as many homeless people in the cities. The taxes are a little bit higher for sales tax. But other than that, like, it seems very American-y. Other than I talk to people, I haven't had it come up yet because I haven't had a debilitating disease or injury. But the healthcare system here, they just get it for free. And it works pretty well as far as I can tell, and everybody has it. And also they spend about half as much per capita on healthcare compared to what we do. The rest of the world spends about half as much per capita because they have dealt with that market failure and don't allow a private system which cannot provide essential goods and services to people who cannot pay the amount of revenues that would be necessary in order to provide that service, in this case healthcare, to justify them getting it at all, in the same way that rural people can't, you know, foot the cost of a fiber optics network with 50 people paying, you know, $5,000 a month for internet or whatever it would be. Same with healthcare. You're not going to get healthcare services if the private marketplace is going to operate with old people, with sick people with pre-existing conditions, and so with poor people, if they can't afford it, obviously. And so here in America, we have an extremely complex system which has a few patchwork type government programs to try to like plug a few of the leaks, called Medicare and Medicaid and different local programs. But more or less, like, the system is pretty terrible, and there's tens of millions of people that don't have coverage, and tens of millions of more people who have health insurance, but that really just means that they get to pay the first $8,000 of their health care coverage each year out of pocket, despite spending you know, hundreds of dollars a month on a plan. And then there's a cap on the amount of money in case they do have any expensive surgeries or anything at, like, you know, $100,000 or something. So they don't even really have health care, even though they're spending a ton of money on healthcare, more than other countries are. That's a market failure. And it's the same thing for other goods and services. When roads are privatized and there's tolls on them, there's the government deficit, or government spending might be reduced because there's more revenues that are brought in, and it might be more efficient in some economic seminar, but it just means that some people aren't going to be able to afford the roads, and so that sucks. So there's just going to be rich people that are able to afford the roads. Or sometimes they privatize, like, bus routes or public transit in cities when they say, oh, we have a government deficit, we need to cut spending here and we need to do the hard things. Well, it's like, when they do that, what they do is they cut the routes, like the bus routes, of the areas that are like the furthest outside the city, which have the least number of people riding them, which like a business person would say, that's a prudent financial decision. Cut the areas that are the least efficient. Well, the only thing is that there's some people that live out there that are poor people that actually might need a bus route in order to get to town. And the actual purpose of government policy is not to, like, run like an efficient business. This is why you should be careful of the Mike Bloombergs and all these billionaires running for office who are like, I'm going to treat government like a business. Well, business is trying to generate as much money as possible for the sociopaths like Bloomberg that, you know, then have hundreds of billions of dollars, which they use to buy positions in the government and politicians themselves. But the government is supposed to actually help the people that it represents. And so this is not the same thing. And so some of those people live outside of town and might need a bus to come pick them up, even if it's not the most prudent financial decision for a businessman if the route was privatized. And it's the same thing, like, libertarians and conservatives really don't like the post office. They're like, the post office sucks. It's a giant waste. Like, we can just privatize everything and have everything go through UPS and FedEx and Amazon and drones, if you know which clip I'm talking about. And it's like, and the reason they don't like it is because out in Alaska, do you think you're going to be able to get a postcard for whatever it is, 50 cents sent from your niece living in California? No, you're not going to be able to do that. And actually, like, you know, Joe taxpayer, I have some bad news. Every time people ship things out to Alaska, a little bit of your tax dollars goes towards that. Are you upset about this? Like, this is kind of the general, the divide between libertarianism and what I'd say that more rational people are that might care about the welfare of people rather than just efficient economic systems, is that yes, the public is subsidizing these services, which might not be prudent financial decisions, but that's not a bad thing because you actually just want to create a good society. Every time that, like, let's say you don't want to have kids, are you upset now that your tax dollars are going towards schools? Why should my tax dollars go towards schools? I'm not going to have any kids. I don't have any kids now. I'm just subsidizing these people over here, and that's not efficient, and it's waste. I'd say that you should have to pay to make sure your kids go. Well, actually, we've decided as a society that education is something that everybody is going to have access to, despite the fact that there's pushed by charter schools and people to privatize it all the time, especially by libertarians and conservatives. They don't like the principle of everybody paying for stuff that are rights for people, rather than people who have the ability to pay, usually rich people, which are usually them, paying for that and then cutting the government services, which would thereby cut their taxes, which would be good for them financially overall, but not good for society and not good for those people, and definitely not good for their children, and not good for the rural people without internet access, and not good for the people who can't afford to get to work without the public transit, and for a myriad of other things as well. It's not good for society. And so that's why the free market's good in some ways, but it should not be idolized in the way that it is. And the people that do idolize it have another agenda, which is usually to cut government services. And that has a intellectual philosophy of kind of individualism that's very rugged and not beneficial for the members of society. And that's just not how I think the world should work. So